Thank you. I'm Alta van der Merwe. I'm the Deputy Dean for Teaching and Learning for the EBIT faculty. And as you may know, the EBIT faculty is currently the largest faculty within the University of Pretoria. It is for me a big honor to welcome you here today, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this presentation. And then I also, it's a big honor for me to present to you our acting dean, Professor Jan Elof, and he will do the welcoming. Thank you.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Natascha Viljoen, the first female CEO of Anglo American Platinum. She began her career as an engineer at ISCOR and amongst other roles took on leadership positions at Anglo Gold Ashanti before joining Lonmin in 2008. At Lonmin, she was Executive Vice President of Processing while also leading the company's sustainability, employee health, environmental, and stakeholder relations work. Prior to her appointment as CEO, she was Group Head of Processing for Anglo American. In that role, she and her team unlocked value across processing operations safely and with a long-term perspective, recognizing their critical commercial place in the mining value chain. Under Natascha's leadership, her team successfully leveraged and accelerated technology development and deployment to unlock the full potential of minerals endowments through processing, delivering significant financial value and competitive advantage. She and her team were recognized for the work in developing technologies which enable the separation of metals from rock, using a fraction of the energy and water of traditional methods, while increasing throughput and productivity. Natascha became CEO in 2020, when the world was facing unprecedented times. Yet, throughout the turbulence, she ensured that the company continued to build its business for the future and remained focused on the next wave of value creation for all the stakeholders. Over and above the phenomenal work she is doing for Anglo American Platinum, she still finds time to serve on advisory boards of chemical engineering departments and faculties at various universities in South Africa and in Australia, University of Queensland. She has served as a non-executive director on the board of Kumba Iron Ore. Natascha is a metallurgical engineer and holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree from the Northwest University and also an executive MBA from the University of Cape Town. Please join me to welcome Natascha Viljoen to deliver the prestigious Hendrik van der Bijl Memorial Lecture for 2022 on the topic, How Hydrogen Can Fuel a Just Energy Transition.
Good evening, everybody. This evening by now, right? I think the last time I would probably had an opportunity to be in this environment, I was a nervous student sitting on the other side, and I always wondered what it felt like to stand on this side of the room. So I have an opportunity to do so tonight. And it is a real privilege for me to be here tonight. So Prof van der Merwe, Prof Elof, thank you for inviting me. And thank you for allowing me this quite unique opportunity to talk at such a prestigious event. Also, our members of South African Academy of Engineering, the Pretoria University students and alumni, fellow engineers, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, it's really a great privilege for me to be here and to reflect on the invaluable role that engineers can and should play. And I must admit, we we're a little bit late tonight because I just came back from the Sekhukhune Valley, and I think what I want to talk to you about tonight is certainly the role that hydrogen plays, but more so the role that engineers play in hydrogen, the role that engineers play and will play in the energy transition. But also, how do we put heart in engineering? Because that's probably what I find one of the most impactful roles that we can play with the kind of background that we have as engineers. Now, we don't need to look much further than Hendrik van der Bijl to see the remarkable work that engineers do to shape the economic future and history of this country. He concluded that cheap power, cheap steel, financial and technical assistance, and education is really important to develop industries and were a prerequisite for future economic development of our country. He was, as you all know, the architect and chairman of Eskom and ISCOR, and that was my first employer, and I had a bursary with ISCOR, and I'm a product of the ISCOR development program. He founded the Industrial Development Corporation and thereby really laid the foundation for the first South African industrialization. And I think we stand at the beginning of what could be a second South African industrialization. But the world has changed since he started this economic industrialization for us, since the 20s and 30s. We have very different problems today. If we look at the problems in society, which I believe that we are uniquely equipped to resolve, we have problems today in our country and in the world with poverty that leads to challenges with dignity, availability and access to water, food, energy, healthcare, and education. So where we are today, and we don't need to go too far to remind ourselves that energy is no longer cheap, and it's certainly not plentiful anymore. China's competitiveness has all but destroyed our steelmaking industry. Our manufacturing sector has not grown at all in real terms since 2015. Our youth unemployment in this country is over 60%. And what I often tell many of our young graduates and students that comes into the business, or even some of our bursars, I had a dinner with them a couple of months ago, and I asked them, well, they all have Anglo Platinum bursaries, and I asked them, so what does Anglo Platinum do? And in a room of about 60 students, nobody could tell me. And I must say, I'm not sure that students were ready for me to preach, to give them a preach at that moment, but that just came naturally. I'm a mom. I mean, it's just things that happen, eh? You start preaching for the youngsters. But the fact is, you are privileged today if you have the money and the opportunity to study at any tertiary qualification in this country or in the world for that matter. And to have the privilege of having paid education and not making absolute use of understanding and being inquisitive about that opportunity, I think is a significant failure. So over the past decade, as the world became wealthier, the South African GDP per capita has reduced by 20%. Now, as an engineer, I remember at an ISCOR bursary interview, actually, they asked me, so what do engineers actually do? And my view at that time was, well, engineers solve problems, right? And I think it was the right answer because I did have a bursary after the time. But I think since then I've learned that we do more than solving problems. We improve people's lives. And that is at the heart of what I think we are as engineers. Now, when we think about all of our challenges in our country with energy insecurity or challenges with security and energy, the unemployment, I think there's another big risk for us that makes some of these pile into insignificance if we start to consider the risk. And that is certainly climate change. And more so, the reality of our country and vulnerable communities' climate resilience for what is definitely forthcoming. Now, a recent report of the World Meteorological Organization show that there's only a 50% chance of the average global temperature reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And some of our current indications are that we will not achieve 1.5% in time. Now that in a vulnerable country like South Africa or in the developing world has got devastating consequences. We've seen some of the extreme weather events and our inability as a country to deal with some of the flooding that we've had in KwaZulu-Natal recently. So there's a real chance that we are on a 4-degree trajectory. But with these challenges, I think comes significant opportunity. And for an engineering society with the kind of foundations that we've had that was built by people like Hendrik van der Bijl, I think that is at the heart of how we find solutions, because we need these visionaries, and we see them stepping up today to find solutions to decarbonize our electricity, our transport, manufacturing, that all together account for 70% of global emissions. Now, it's a really exciting space because we see quite a bit of our countries, we see regulation all supporting this. To date, we've got 70 countries, more than 70 countries, who've committed to reaching targets of net zero in the next 3 decades. Now, this includes South Africa, of course, which means that we need to find a way to cut over 440 million tons of carbon emissions every year. The number of companies globally with similar goals has increased from 21 in 2016 to 3,600 companies today, who all have commitments to reduce or get to carbon zero or net zero. We've also seen in all of our big economies, the US, the EU, China and Japan, who all have a share of renewables already in their energy mix and is expected to increase this significantly. So in the US, for example, just recently announced the Inflation Reduction Act, which is one of 3 climate-relevant laws that's been passed just in the last year, providing more than $500 billion of support in various forms for the green energy transition. And these incentives are expected to release trillions of dollars in private investment. Over the past 2 years, venture capitalists have put 70 billion rand into more than 1,300 clean energy startups. The global effort is absolutely commendable, but we need to do much, much more. So what is the role of metals in the just transition? And I want to get to that point and want to drive the connection between, as engineers, we think about technical solutions, we think about technology. We are really good in integrating systems. It's how we integrate not only the technical systems, but the social systems, the environmental systems all together, because I think that's at the heart of where we have real opportunity. Now, if we look at metals, the mining and metals industry, as South Africans, we all know that as mining, we have not covered ourselves with glory over many years. To the contrary, we have made some really big errors. We have blood on our hands. We have a significant environmental impact on our hands. But without the role that the mining industry and the metals play in making the world a more modern world, we wouldn't have had any of the infrastructure we have around us today. It is at the heart of what Hendrik van der Bijl has started in mining coal, mining iron ore, making our own steel, making sure we've got aggregate to build our own roads, starting Eskom so that we have clean, cheap energy to support that transition. But we need to do better. As a mining industry, we've just recently seen what has happened in Jagersfontein. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that as an industry we continue to impact the environment and impact the lives of people. And we still have a significant endowment in our country to really make an impact on this energy transition. So let's just quickly reflect on South Africa's potential. Firstly, we are richly endowed with a number of minerals that is required for the energy transition. We've got high quality iron ore that requires way less energy to transform. We have PGMs that has been playing a significant role over many years to clean the air that we breathe. We have manganese that plays a big role in a different energy profile, energy mix. We also have significant natural resources in the form of wind and sun. We're one of only 5 countries that has enough renewable energy available to us that we can look after our own requirements and export energy. Now, I know as we sit here today, people frown at me when we talk about exporting of energy because bloody hell, can we just look after ourselves for starters? But I think if there's one way for us to leapfrog some of the challenges that we have in our energy security, it is certainly thinking about how do we enhance the green energy and renewable opportunity that we have in this country. Let's look further about what we need for the energy transition. If we look at electrical vehicles, now, in my own interest, I am going to differentiate between battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electrical vehicles, and I hope that my audience know that there's a big difference, and that fuel cell vehicles are also electrical vehicles. Battery electric vehicles require 6 times the mineral input that we need for an internal combustion engine today. And it's not only the input in materials that we need to look at, it is also that it's only green by the time we've converted our energy generation and transmission into green. According to the International Energy Agency, a concerted effort to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement would mean we need to mine 4 times more metals than normal. Now, these metals, obviously, we've spoken about PGMs, that is very important in the generation of green hydrogen through PEM electrolysis and in fuel cell electric vehicles. We also know that today's metal supply and investment plans fall short of what's needed to reach this Paris Agreement. Now, our country is rich in metals and minerals, but there's a couple of challenges not only we as a country have, but certainly globally. There's a big need for us to change the way we consume energy, which means we need to start to look around efficiencies in every aspect of energy utilization. To mine and refine the amount of metals that we need, 4 times more than what we need today, we need an input of green energy. And we need to start to think about the system that is required for us to transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a green energy economy. Now, the realization came to me the one day that I realized if we think about when the first car was produced, 110 years ago, first Ford vehicle, a car can be any color as long as it's black, you remember that? That is when our fossil fuel industry started with mobility in real scale. But it developed over a century as we see in population growth, technology growth. We refined the way that we used fossil fuels. It's more than 100 years old, and we are going to need to change every aspect of that fossil fuel-based economy into something that looks very different. So we need to start to think about, when we think about generation, what does that look like? When we think about the metals that we have as inputs, everything through to our economic system will have to change. We don't have all the global rules on what green energy is. We don't have the standards. We don't have the safety principles and processes. And we have to develop that in less than 2 decades for us to get close to achieve any of our carbon targets. In addition to that, the world today is far more socially conscious and active. So we don't only need the minerals, of which we notionally have enough in the world. We need to be able to economically extract them. We need access to land. To get access to land, we need to have relationships with our communities. We need to have a social footprint where the people in the countries that we operate in, where the minerals endowment is, want us to mine in the environment. Otherwise, we will not get access to minerals. We will not get access to the land that we need. We will not get access to the land that we need to produce renewables. So that brings us to ethical supply chains. Now, I know for a fact that the curriculum has moved on significantly from the time that I sat in some of these rooms. But I think one of my biggest realizations and learnings on the job was our social consciousness and the impact that we can make both negatively and positively. And we need to win societal support for us to continue to do what we need to do to decarbonize. Now, in my view, this is another area where we as South Africa has got the potential to become a preferred metal supplier to customers globally. Now, I'm going to use a couple of examples. During the mining on Indaba this year, for the first time in 10 years, we had a delegation from the US government. And it was really interesting to engage with them because as the world understands the need for critical minerals and metals for the energy transition, they also realize that it's not necessarily mined in the developed world, not at the moment. And that the US have not renewed their mining policies in 130 years because their view was always that they can source their metals cheaper from elsewhere. So let's start with the regulatory environment. We all know that we have challenges in leadership in our country. We know and we see that flow through in the level of crime and corruption that we have. We feel it as business in terms of the frustration that we have to do business. But above all of that, our mining policies and regulations are leading. If we look at our mining charter, the social consciousness that's built in there, it is leading in the world. And having that opportunity to have worked through a number of pains that we've had over the last 2.5 decades, today is valuable for us because we know how to do it. We just have to go and do it. We need to continue to build confidence amongst our stakeholders, and we need to continue to work on ESG and sustainability in these ethical supply chains. Now, again, certainly in Southern Africa, we are leading the way, and it's a little bit around the PGM industry. And we have worked with customers, affected communities, labor unions, and NGOs, and we've developed a standard called the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance that we just fondly refer to as IRMA. Now, IRMA goes beyond our mining charter. It goes beyond regulatory compliance. It provides independent third-party assurance that metals are responsibly sourced, meeting the highest ethical and sustainability standards. And the first mine who has, let me just explain this. So it's got an IRMA transparency, which basically an entry level, and then IRMA 25, 50, 75, and 100. And you have to be able to walk on water by the time you get to 100. The other thing is we often find that some of our sustainability metrics are measured on the basis of our glossy reports, which we all know is a glossy report. These IRMA teams come in with big teams, and they test everything from human rights violation to environmental impact and our ability to extract maximum value out of the resource that we mine. They go and talk to community members, they talk to our contractors, they talk to our employees independently. And our Unki mine last year has achieved IRMA 75, which is an outstanding performance, but more than ever, it shows that we can mine responsibly, even in a country like Zimbabwe. Sorry, I should have mentioned that these in Zimbabwe. We are going ahead with 3 of our other mines towards the beginning of next year and the end of next year to get them IRMA certified. And to me, it builds the confidence that in a country where we have many, many challenges, we can mine responsibly on a global scale. And we do have the right to be on the global platform. Now, the second area of opportunity for South Africa is just, I've touched on the immense renewable energy potential. But the challenge that we have is, I've spoken to land access, and we're all very familiar with the challenges we have around Eskom. We've seen significant regulatory changes over the last while, where we went from 1 megawatt of self-generation to 10 to 100 megawatts, and now there's an independent or a limitless amount of self-generation that we can do. The reality is we need to be able to wheel it. And the sources of fossil fuels and the sources of renewable fuels are in different areas in our country. And that is generally true globally. So some other anecdotes. Europe can only produce 60% of its own renewable energy. They will have to import the rest of it. Japan is the same, they slightly more. They can produce 60% of their own renewable energy. So these kind of imports requires a way to move energy from one point to another. Now, fossil fuels and coal gave us a very specific way of the movement of energy. You can move energy along a copper cable, or you can move energy in the form of diesel and petrol. The future for us, if we only look at electrical energy, means we will have to put everything through a copper cable. Now, it's interesting that China's electrical infrastructure at the moment will allow it to only charge 1 million vehicles at a time on its grid. So grid capacity and stability generally is a problem for all of the countries that we're talking about, as is for South Africa. So a big part of our challenge is where we have the highest level of yield of renewable energy, we don't have the transmission available. So quite a bit of work to do. In collaboration with Eskom, there is opportunity for us to go into that Mpumalanga area where we know we have most of our fossil fuels and use, it's not the same yields as what we have in the Northern Cape, for example, but it gives us access to the grid. There, we see a couple of other opportunities. Just recently, I think in the last probably week or two, Goldfields has announced they've commissioned their first 50 megawatt solar plant. We are shovel ready for a 100 megawatt solar plant at Mogalakwena at Limpopo, and it should start operations by 2024. And as a broader company, we are working with a French company called EDF to generate between 3 and 5 gigawatts of renewable power in South Africa. One of our challenges would be storage. And we also have a solution for storage at one of our mines in the Steelpoort area for hydropumping and storage, using the natural topography to do that. I think this start to talk about some of the other aspects I wanted to touch on, and that is in the areas of collaboration. Because certainly on our own and in our own silos, we won't be able to achieve what we need to achieve. But as we collaborate, and I must say, the mining industry is an industry that's got quite a bit of ego. I don't know if you guys know about ego. Yeah. There's quite a bit of ego, so it's not invented here. It's another company. I'm not going to work with you. We have seen that need and crisis is forcing us to step beyond ego and step beyond our own boundaries and start to collaborate in ways that are really impactful. In that way, you would have seen recently Sasol and ArcelorMittal is working together on solutions for green steel. That is really important for us. Now, all of these will play a significant role in reducing carbon emissions at our sites. That I think if we've spoken about collaboration, we've spoken about the fact that as South Africa, we're endowed with a number of different opportunities. One of the reasons I was really excited to be here today is because I'm excited about the role that the tertiary education system needs to continue to play in South Africa. I think all of us, or many of us probably, is a product of the tertiary qualification systems in South Africa. And as I travel the world, I find South Africans literally anywhere. We are transportable and transposable in a way that is absolutely unique. Our resilience, our work ethic, our ability to really solve problems is unique in many instances in the world. And I had the privilege and the opportunity to, with Anglo American and with many other mining companies, work and travel across most of the world. So I think I've got a perspective on that. Our challenge, however, is how do we retain that skill and momentum in country? How do we continue to build the capacity that we need in our tertiary qualifications to ensure that we can reach a small fraction of the 60% of unemployed youth in this country? Because then we have more than enough to export as well. But without fundamentally starting to think how we educate and how we make that education available to the 60% of unemployed youth, how do we make sure that our schooling system produces? And I cannot start to understand the full challenge that you as a tertiary institution have on a daily basis. I can only imagine what it is. If I consider the school programs that we are working in, but the reality is, without creating capacity and capability in our country, we will fall short in delivering it. And we can only do it through educators like many of you are. And we need that to secure a just energy transition. If we consider coal mining, we have over 100,000 people working in coal mining. Coal still makes out 90% of our energy production. I'm telling you nothing new. What I do want you to think about in a moment is the scale of the challenge that we have that we have at hand on leapfrogging some of the reality that we have in Eskom infrastructure through good engineering, by the way, and into a new world of renewables, whilst we're taking 100,000 people times 10, including the number of people they are responsible for, 1 million people with us in that transition. I can tell you that globally, there's a more and more of an awareness that just transition is not only a South African aspect. Globally, and I'll talk about our blue truck. I think all of you know about our blue truck now. I've just adopted the blue truck. But the blue truck has given me an opportunity to access and be at the table on really interesting areas in the world. I recently attended the US's a renewable energy symposium led by Senator Kerry. And the fact that we have done the work on that blue truck gave us access to that global platform. And what's important for us to be at that global platform is to remind the developed world that without a global just transition between generally the developed north and the developing south, and very generic statements, I know it's not precise, the world is waking up to the reality of without changing the way they think about the developing world, they will not have the resources to decarbonize. Equally, we see Africa waking up and saying, well, why are we lagging behind? Where are we falling short in leading the world? There was a recent video that made the rounds about just putting all of these other big economies, the US and China, into Africa, just contemplating a much younger generation on our continent that gives us the opportunity with education to develop a century or an age of younger people coming through that can really make a change in the world, because Africa's got all the resources we need. So in that just transition, not only is that important for us as a country, but it is important for us globally. So we've spoken about the fact that the blue truck has given me an opportunity on the world stage, but I think as a company, we also take it really seriously, because we do understand that in this country and globally, that comes with a certain level of responsibility and accountability. In South Africa and in the world where we operate, we are mining the resources that belongs to the people of this country. We are using our shareholders' money, not ours, not the taxpayers, our shareholders' money. In some cases, it is the taxpayers' money or your pension funds. So we need to be very careful about our shareholders' money. And we have the amazing people in South Africa to bring these three components together to really unlock amazing value. But that value needs to be just and it needs to be fair. And I've done a case study over the last couple of days for a leadership exercise, and it was very interesting. It was a case study that was developed, let's call it, in the developed North. And there was no mention of societal responsibility. And as engineers, very much certainly in the time that I went to university, it was about, rightly so, the building blocks of the technology, the technical building blocks, the technologies, the way of thinking, the systems integration, challenging, critical thinking. That's what we were taught. But only recently we started to think, well, how do we bring the societal and social aspects of that into the play? And as a company, we're very aware of our responsibility to make that and make a bigger impact than just the financial value that we generate. So let's quickly talk a little bit more about the hydrogen economy. We've spoken about the just transition. Global demand for energy is expected to increase to up by 40% by 2050. The Hydrogen Council estimates that the international hydrogen market could be worth up to $2.5 trillion by 2050. That is a lot of money. I do not know how much money is that. I can't contextualize it. And it therefore makes the hydrogen economy an attractive growth opportunity beyond the immediate applications that we see in our operations. Now, we play a role in helping that hydrogen, to get that hydrogen to scale, because as a company of our size, we believe that the work that we need to do, not only do we need to do the work to decarbonize our own value chain, but also do the work in technology development to support a broader energy transition. The technology to produce, store, and transport hydrogen already exists, but most of the 70 million tonne of current hydrogen is not green. And it's generally used in oil refining and ammonia production as a chemical feedstock. So when we then think about green energy, we need to look at other alternatives, and green hydrogen is one of those areas that can make a real impact. But we do have barriers in our way. The generation of financially or economically feasible green hydrogen would be the first. With the Inflation Reduction Act of the US that they've recently announced, hydrogen is currently being produced at $3 a tonne. There is an incentive of $3 a tonne for green hydrogen, making the generation of green hydrogen basically free when you generate it in the US, which is of significant value because it is a significant barrier to us to get the hydrogen economy going. The second one is around building supporting infrastructure and the supply chains to promote and then promote use at scale. So at this symposium that I've been in Pittsburgh, the one reality to me, looking at the more than 8,000 delegates that were there, is green hydrogen production is underway. If you go and look at the number of projects that is in feasibility, the growth that we're seeing in a number of green hydrogen production, it is exponentially growing year on year. The conversation has moved away from how do we generate cheap green hydrogen to how we now develop use cases for it. So I've mentioned the 500 billion incentives from the US before, and it's not only the US. Europe has a 750 billion euro plan that includes wind, solar, and hydrogen projects. So in our biggest countries and biggest economies, there's a significant amount of support for hydrogen. So against this backdrop, a growing number of organizations and enterprises are now exploring these opportunities. So from a South African perspective, we've also been working closely with the Department of Science and Innovation. And we've done a couple of interesting things, and I'll touch a little bit later on the work that we've done, for instance, in a use case around the Hydrogen Valley and the Hydrogen Corridor. But more specifically and closer to home for us, it is the hydrogen and in the PGM space. The platinum mines is the biggest single employment entity in our country, with employing 170,000 employees in this country. So we do have an existential crisis at the moment, with 60% of our product currently going into internal combustion engines, and as the energy transition happens, we do see a bigger and bigger attraction for battery electric vehicles for all of the right reasons. It is interesting, though, that today your battery electric vehicle, if the nickel is refined in Indonesia and you have a 50-50% fossil fuel renewable energy mix, your battery electric vehicle's got a 40% bigger carbon footprint than your internal combustion engine over 200,000 kilometers. So those are the interesting things where engineers more and more, I hope you can start to see all of the connection points to where we need engineers, because without thinking through this systemic integration of transitioning this carbon, fossil fuel-based economy, we are going to have point solutions. We will get it right eventually. It will probably take us 2 to 3 times longer to get it right than if we stand back and really start to use the skills that we are taught in an engineering course, using our experienced engineers to start to pull these together. And battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles as an alternative, therefore, is really important, because if we take 60% of our market away as PGMs, we will kill the PGM industry in South Africa. And therefore, the livelihoods of close to 1.5 million people in this country. So creating and being actively involved in how we create an alternative use case for PGMs is really important. And for the chemical engineers amongst us, we know that the PGM suite of metals has got very interesting and unique properties, and predominantly around the catalytic properties. And in that catalytic properties, it's not only useful for internal combustion engines in autocatalytic converters, but it does play a role in fuel cell electric vehicles and in PEM electrolysis and in air and in cleaning air. There are several different kind of uses of PGMs that spreads across items that makes the world a healthier place to live in for people. That is not only green air, it's health. There's cancer drugs, there is pacemakers. It's used in food preservation, and it's used in energy in the end of the day. Not only are we doing work to continue to develop the fuel cell electric vehicle and the ecosystem required to support that, but we're also doing work in all of these other areas to continue to develop these markets. We have, and Jana, slide 9. You are following well, thank you. We have in 2018 spun out IP Ventures, where we are leveraging early funding through various other partners. We currently have 12 limited partners where we are pursuing more than 500 PGM opportunities with 24 PGM containing or enabling technologies across the world at the moment. We are doing significant advocacy work because we link it to the importance of the future of the business and the importance of the future of the PGM industry for South Africa. Because we do believe that we will continue to unlock various very interesting applications. And the highlight of this here was certainly for us the launch of our hydrogen-fueled mine haul truck. When we looked, now this is an interesting story, and it is a story on how when we think about systems, and we tend to think of outside our conventional box of thinking, how things can really become interesting. So we all know we need to decarbonize, and we start to look at a renewable energy source for Mogalakwena mine. And we thought, okay, we're going to start off with solar. That's where everybody starts. But as a responsible mining company, we've got hurdle rates that we need to achieve. So we do the analysis, and we cannot meet our hurdle rates. Okay, so that's a slam dunk. What's the next step? So what do we do if we don't have to meet our hurdle rates, but we just break even? Okay, now the facility is bigger than what we need. Okay, so what do we do with the energy that we now generate? So we need to store. But we also want to create an interesting application for our metals. So why don't we generate hydrogen? Okay, cool, we can generate hydrogen. What do we do with the hydrogen? 70% of our carbon footprint at Mogalakwena is diesel. So why don't we convert our diesel truck in the biggest hydrogen fuel cell vehicle on Earth? And that's what we've done.
80% of diesel consumption. That is what our mining haul trucks currently account for on site. To meet our ambitious climate change commitments, we needed to develop a zero-emission solution. That solution is hydrogen power. Decarbonizing our business and our planet. To start big, we went light. Light on emissions, light on the environment, and fueled by the lightest element on Earth, hydrogen. This is the inspiration behind our new-gen zero-emission haulage solution project, an end-to-end integrated green hydrogen production, fueling, and haulage system for our mine sites. Meet the world's lightest 510-ton hydrogen-powered ultra-class mine haul truck, a world first in mining. Our new-gen truck is retrofitted from a diesel-powered vehicle, with H2 fuel cells that can generate enough power to function continuously for 24 hours. It uses a hybrid hydrogen fuel cell providing roughly half of the power and a battery pack the other half to allow energy recovery from braking. Hydrogen enters the fuel cell from the tank and mixes with oxygen to create water in a chemical reaction catalyzed by platinum. This generates electricity that is used to power the motors that drive the wheels. The only emission from the vehicle is water vapor. The power management and battery systems in the truck have been developed to improve overall efficiency by recovering energy when the haul trucks travel downhill through regenerative braking. By harvesting the regenerative energy created when driving downhill, we reduce our need for external energy. This energy, stored in the battery, together with the hydrogen, extends the truck's range and reduces the out-of-cycle time for the trucks, since hydrogen refueling is significantly faster than recharging batteries. NewGen is our future smart mining program in action. We're continuously working to make mining safer, smarter, and more efficient for a low-carbon future with unlimited possibilities. Together, we're shaping a better future.
Now that is absolute human ingenuity. And obviously having had the privilege to be very closely involved in this, I must say I was quite emotional when we launched it. And just to be clear, I was not the clever engineer behind this, because that clever I'm not. But this is, I think, a product of human ingenuity. It was also, if we think about the capabilities that we have as engineers, and I'm just going to take two bookends. At UCT, they have developed a patent that ensures that the PGM powder that's needed for the fuel cell membrane, that the powder, how we produce the powder, and then painting the powder on a membrane, keeping it in suspension. That's at the one bookend, where we really looked at the detailed nuts and bolts of technologies. On the other bookend, we had how that ultimately is integrated into a system like this. And we had the best engineers working on this integrated system, because now not only do we need to optimize the power distribution between a fuel cell and a battery, we want to optimize the energy system and recover most of the energy in the braking system, as they say. You need to integrate that into the control and operating system of the truck. There's a big portion of safety in this. So we have taken on board process safety that's generally more predominantly used in the petrochemical industry, to make sure that how we develop and design this truck, it is safe. Because all of these are aspects that people believe make hydrogen vehicles or hydrogen as a technology not safe. And as part of the work that we do is all of these aspects. Now, I know that we're running out of time. I had a quick moment, so I'm going to try and finish up the last little bit. But that is the benefit of what we're doing here. I want to take it one step further in terms of systems integration. In the audience here today, and sorry, George, to point you out, I have to. George is a chemical engineer. He's working in our social performance team. He's an engineer with a heart, like most engineers. And that kind of ability to link technical capability, the understanding of systems, to what we need as a human race, I think comes together again in an engineer. I have engineers working in my HR department because engineers are flexible. Engineers learn a way to think. They link their thinking potential to heart, and they just make amazing people. There's many other things happening in South Africa. Sasol and ArcelorMittal I've spoken about. Boegoebaai Special Economic Zone, and that Sasol is currently developing a first green hydrogen generation and using their South African developed Fischer-Tropsch process. South Africans are amazing. And we have, with the Department of Science and Innovation, we've done a feasibility study on a hydrogen corridor. It's part of a hydrogen valley that will build infrastructure for hydrogen trucks, haul trucks, from our Mogalakwena mine through Joburg to Durban with the necessary infrastructure as a use case and start to get the hydrogen economy going in South Africa. It's got the potential to add as much as $8.8 billion to our South African GDP. And you can start to see how it becomes really important if we think about just transition. The roadmap could get us to a just and inclusive net zero economic opportunity. So all of this, I know, sounds like very bold and ambitious targets. But when I sat back and I looked at the blue truck is way more than just a truck. The blue truck brings together the possibilities that we can make happen as engineers. So all of these bold and ambitious targets is absolutely possible. It is possible with founding ourselves in the right technical building blocks, continuing to develop curious and critical thinking, bringing systems together and pulling in heart into what we do. The need for just transition and the potential offered to us in the green energy world and in hydrogen can help to drive a second great industrialization in our country. It can secure our energy supply into the future, diversify revenue streams for our economy, and most importantly, through that, create jobs. And it make most of the amazing resources we have in our country. And more than ever, it needs visionary leadership. And I've underscored this in red. Visionary leadership all the way from our president to the engineers in our faculties to the pupils in our schools. Because without this visionary leadership, let me reframe it. With this visionary leadership, we have everything we need to make this energy transition happen. Thank you for being such attentive listeners, and I do apologize. I ran, I think, 10 minutes over time. There are opportunities for questions, but I might have talked into question time. So,
We can take it.
okay. All right, so if there's any questions, I'll ask George to answer. Any questions or comments? Yes.
What is the energy efficiency of splitting water?
Okay, so I should have known I'm going to get some energy questions now. So I don't know. I can't tell you that answer, and I'm glad I don't have to write an exam at the moment. But if you are referring to just the energy efficiency from how do we take renewable energy into splitting of water and then to putting it back together, it's clearly less energy efficient. I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, fossil fuels or diesel, it's got about a 70% energy efficiency. The hydrogen system's got 45%. If I've got my numbers right. So don't hold me to that. I think that's your exam question.
Are you engaged in improving that efficiency? Because I think that is a crucial thing to improve.
Absolutely.
To make this whole thing more meaningful and more economical and make it grow fast. I understand that at high temperatures it's much more energy efficient than at room temperature.
That's right. That is right. I think I've spoken to somebody at Pittsburgh, and I think the numbers she mentioned was something like up to 65% energy efficiency. Does that sound about right? I think so. Yes, I think that's the short answer. I think, again, it's important to think about this as a system. If you think about it as hydrogen as a fuel source, side to side, to diesel and petrol, you might find that it's not entirely economically viable. Saying that, however, at $3 per kilo at the pump, it breaks even with diesel and petrol today, with energy efficiency taken into consideration. It is also important to consider that by the time our renewable energy projects at the moment, we are getting, excluding transmission, including capital, at 50% of Eskom cost. By the time you have your input energy at 50% of cost, you've got 45% energy efficiency. It makes for a very different equation. And I think we need to continue to drive to say, well, how do we further integrate it into the system? And the truck is a typical example, because as we then consider the full energy cycle, we not waste energy on braking without utilizing. We take that and we use it for dynamic battery charging. So in that process, you use the full energy system. So absolutely agree. If you just look at it on a one-on-one basis, it doesn't look like it's breaking even. But I was hoping that the story around starting to think differently around how we think about energy, how we use our energy, will drive a different thinking around how we think about the economics and how we make it work. So I don't think I've given you an exact answer, but I'm hoping it's helping a little bit. Okay. Was another question? Sure, that was a couple of quick thinking there.
Sorry, I think my question is answered. Thank you.
Okay.
How do you change your mindset to actually be open to that? Because obviously the risk profile that you have, as we've heard, we must increase the efficiencies very significantly, but it will involve dead ends, of course, and how do we actually make that change to successfully get into people that are eager risk takers and also able to manage that?
Sure, I should answer that. I should ask that question. There's a couple of things that comes up. Firstly, it obviously it requires significant change management. I think the first thing that comes to mind is absolute leadership and visionary leadership, as I ended up with. And it's visionary leadership. One of my colleagues, Tony O'Neill, our technical director, he's an absolute unicorn. He is brilliant on a totally different level. As a university, if you can ever get him to come and talk to you, he's absolutely brilliant. Him and I had a debate one day around mechanization of mines. And I said to him, Tony, how do we do that in South Africa where we have a real challenge with jobs? There's no way that I can go back or even fund, because if you think about mechanization in a country like Australia with high wage bills and low low unemployment. It's a very different business case than this. But part of the business case is efficiency and safety. And he sat back for a moment, and this is in his brilliance, and he said, Natascha, nobody said we need to pay our economic rent on the inside of the gate. Because if we make money and we are responsible in the way that we mine, we can put that value back outside the gate. We don't have to have people working on the inside of the gate. Why would you want people working underground if they can have other meaningful jobs in a much safer and friendlier environment? And I think it's that kind of leadership and that kind of thought leadership that the people in this room, I think we need to start to challenge ourselves with, because it's that kind of thought leadership that forces us to think differently. Then, of course, we need to start to behave differently, but thoughts generally drive behavior. And generally, things like what drives behavior is, sadly, the crisis that we have. A Jagersfontein failure, the tailings dam failure. We struggled to get all of our mining peers signing up to GISTM, which is the new global standard on tailings dams. Now everybody's focused on GISTM, but we had to have a Jagersfontein before we have to have a Brumadillo or for one of those tailing dams failures. We have to blow up a human cave, a heritage site in Australia before we start to wake up to it's not good enough anymore. So I think as an industry, it took us quite some time to change that paradigm. I do want to make another comment though, because despite the fact, I think as a mining industry, we need to take it on the nose that we need to do better. What we have done in this country was amazing. We could have done better much, much earlier. But that thought leadership is tracking through, and we now have very real global standard practical solutions that guides us on how do we make sure that we do the right work to engage, to build relationships, and to develop meaningful livelihoods in the communities that we operate in. But it starts with a very different leadership, and I think, sadly, very often gets escalated in pace by either a crisis or a disaster. And I think some of the things, and it's interesting in safety, we think through this on how do we create a sense of the urgency that goes with a disaster or a burning platform without the disaster or the burning platform. Because if we can manage that and that kind of thinking, it would definitely help us to engage with the problem at pace at a very different level. If you consider what we've done with COVID, and if you think about the human behavior changes that we've had over COVID, the one day, none of us who wore masks. We went from nobody wearing masks to a whole country wearing masks in less than a week. Probably a little bit more, because we didn't have enough masks. But if you just think, I mean, we started wearing masks, and we all, what did we pay for a mask? 100 rand a mask, and I walk in at Rosebank when we started to do shopping, and the next moment everybody's producing masks. And that's human behavior that was driven through a crisis in a very short period of time. So I think quite a bit of that is how do we create an environment where we simulate these crises without actually having them. And it is a big challenge, because I believe as a mining industry we're moving forward with leaps and bounds. But we are constrained by many other aspects of the operations of the environments we operate in. One of the biggest is certainly the level of corruption and crime we have in our country. It's hamstringing us on so many levels. But then, when we deal with illegal mining, and we have 16 people working for 6 weeks in old mining areas. Now, I don't know who of you have been underground in a conventional mine? A couple of us. Have you been there where you switch off the light and there's no airflow? Okay? That's what they go down there, they work there for 6 weeks, they strip cable, they only have a bag of millimill. They come out and we arrest them. They're not the syndicate. They are paid cents in the rand for 6 weeks of work to put food on the table. And that's the kind of dilemma we have that we need to resolve, and we will only resolve it through kickstarting our economy. And one of the key points, as per Hendrik van der Bijl's many, many moons vision, was to get energy to look different. To get, well, probably not to look different then, but to get energy as a cheap source of how do we kickstart and grow our economy. I don't know if that was helpful. I can continue to talk about this for a long time, I must admit, so we'll probably move to another question. There's a question in the back.
Good evening. Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
It sounds like to get to a net zero economy, we would have to go against entropy and increase our carbon intake to build the infrastructure. So for hydrogen, how much more carbon would we need, or fossil fuels would we need to put into the system to get to a sustainable situation?
It's a spot-on question. And it's a question that generally the world is not thinking about at the moment. So I don't have the answer for you, but you are exactly right. Unless we... compare it to hydrogen, you mean?
Hydrogen compared to, say, solar or wind energy, how much more would it need or less?
So remember, you do need energy to generate hydrogen. So if you have green energy, the metals that goes into hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are way less than what goes into batteries. We need 6 different metals in batteries, where in a fuel cell you need iridium and platinum. And the bulk of the South African production is going to be green pretty soon. So just from that point of view, linked to renewable energy, it can be much lower intensity. But the reality of what you just said is, unless as a world we understand the impact of mining more metals, we will do more harm than good. The other thing that it highlights for me is we cannot be focused purely on renewables and batteries. Carbon capture and storage, alternative fuel sources, more efficient other uses of carbon-based or fossil fuels needs to be all part of the equation until we get to that zero carbon. Okay, there's one last question there in the back.
Thank you. In your presentation, you mentioned that there is a problem with power storage. And I just want to find out if there's a small guy there, an entrepreneur who is working on the power storage project, would Anglo American be interested to join hand with him? We actually funding this guy, but because our funding is small and the pace by which is moving is very slow, but his project is at advanced stage. If you'd like to see it, I can take it even tonight or tomorrow morning to go and see it. Thank you.
So in Anglo American and Platinum, we've got a couple of different ways of supporting entrepreneurs and startups. We've got our Zemele project, our Zemele program, which absolutely is designed for seed funding into projects, small projects like that, goes through a full bankable feasibility evaluation. And we support companies that are successful to get further full funding with banks that we have a relationship with. So we can certainly get your number and connect you with Zemele. And the other one would be IP Ventures. If it's got anything to do with PGMs, there's also IP Ventures. So there's definitely 2 mechanisms available.
Professor Wiekers van Niekerk from the University of Stellenbosch says, South Africa clearly has a significant advantage in renewable energy. However, should we focus on exporting green hydrogen and or ammonia with the associated challenges to transport these gaseous liquids and competition from countries such as Morocco, or rather on exporting products higher up the value chain such as green steel and sustainable aviation fuel?
Or do we do all of the above? I think it's a very relevant question, and I think I'm going to answer it slightly differently. We need to look after our own energy. And if you just imagine what South Africa was 30 years ago, with one of the advantages of our country was that we had reliable, cheap energy. And that brought significant investment into the country. Investment both upstream and downstream. Quite a bit of that investment has left the country. We've got smelters not running, and we're exporting chrome ore instead of making ferrochrome, as an example. And there's many more examples. So I think the point is spot on. Let's start with our own energy. Let's flywheel our own economy and bring some of that investment back. And we still have enough to export. So I think, and it comes back to your question, I think, the moment we start to think about systems instead of point solutions, the kind of possibilities are just amazing. So thank you for that question. I think I am going to stop there. It's been a good hour and 15 minutes. I do appreciate it. I didn't see anybody nod off, or at least you were polite enough to look interested. Thank you for the opportunity. It was really an honor to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Natascha, for a very informative talk. I would like to call on Mr. Bob Pullen, previous president from the South Africa Academy of Engineering, to do the vote of thanks. Thank you, Bob.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Was it evening already? And Natascha, I haven't met you yet, but good afternoon. First of all, let me say that the President, whose place I'm standing in here, Neil McLeod, is in Durban at the moment, and I bring his best wishes for this evening and to you who are here and also online. Neil wishes you all the best and apologizes for him being absent. I need to thank the speaker, guest, and I hope friend for a long time for being with us this evening, and to hand to you a gift so that you could remember today and all these very attentive folk who are listening to you this afternoon. Closing off the evening, I would just, it is necessary to record again this healthy relationship we have between this University of Pretoria and the South African Academy of Engineering, who for many years now have been hosting the lecture which is named for Dr. Hendrik van der Bijl. And we've had on the back of your program, you'll see the long list of previous speakers, which goes much further back than my memory and probably further back than some people's lives that are sitting here today. And to say to the university, thank you very much indeed through Professor Yeloff, and convey to your faculty and to the university itself our appreciation from the Academy. This is made possible by the generosity of EBIT at the university, and that is highly appreciated. Thank you very, very much, and a safe journey home after you've moderately enjoyed some refreshments in the foyer. Thank you.